Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the second half of our event, which is going to be dedicated to the launch of negotiations on cohesion policy programs in Lithuania for the next multi-annual financial framework. And the first presentation on priorities for investment will be given by Normans, Katarina, and Angela Martinez Sarasola, who is head of unit responsible for the 3 Baltic states at Directorate General for regional policy regional and urban policy. So, without further delay, Normans, the floor is yours.
So good afternoon. I'm back, as promised, for those who were here in the morning. And as I said, in the morning, we are working this year, this time, in a slightly improved manner between the European semester and coordination of the structural funds. And I explained the logic already in the morning, but just for those who were not here, to say that for the Commission, and I think also for everybody who was already involved before, both in the management of funds and also in the process of the European semester, it is only a logic consequence of what we've been doing so far. Because as, for example, the DG Regi and also, of course, DG Employment was the core DG in the semester process, but now we are too. But we've been working already for years with this process. Why? Because, as I said in the morning, the investment itself and funding doesn't resolve the problems and doesn't lead to sustainable economic growth. Why? Because there are other very important issues which need to be changed or improved. And here we are talking about structural reforms. We are talking about different fields of legislation or environment in terms of education, business environment, and this is what the European semester is about. It identifies objectively the weaknesses in the country, in our regions, in some fields, and tries to help to improve so that together with investment, which is not just structural funds, but now we have other instruments, Investment Fund for Europe, but also we have big programs, Horizon, and Connecting Europe facility, and we are proposing new ones, Digital Europe, and so on. All together, with funding, we have to support these reforms and make sure that all together we have sustainable development on the ground and we create more jobs and quality life for our citizens. This is the whole, I think, rationale behind why we are now so closely linked with the European semester. So it's not another top-up screening, but it's just a logic work together. And I think my first slide, I have to push. Now we go further. Here you obviously see, because European semester is a very deep process. It's a work of the whole Commission services, joining our expertise and actually analyzing the situation in different aspects. So different DGs are involved, and together we agree on one staff working document, which now also includes analysis of the funds investments, but also it includes analysis which comes from implementing European structural funds. Because it is also true that sometimes when we implement funds, we see where the problems are. And sometimes we feel even the fund implementation is taken a hostage of weaknesses in other fields, you know, be it education, labor market, or business environment, but also some other things like public procurement, for example, where we need really improvements in terms of transposing EU directives, also making national and regional legislation better. And this is why this analysis also in future will deliver better policy results, not just for funds, but actually also for other fields. So we expect that it would lead to more consistent application of EU policies on the ground. Of course, better impact and reach out to stakeholders, because one of the key horizontal principles for the Commission, for the discussion, not just on semester, but particularly on the discussion of future priorities for funds, is a dialogue between different stakeholders and different levels of governance. We have insisted on that before. We have quite successful results through, but we need to make sure that this dialogue happens from the beginning through the implementation till the very end of our programs, because we need to learn also what is an impact on beneficiaries, particularly also because we want to increase transparency. Accountability stays because we are, responsible for the implementation of EU budget, but it is also about simplification and continuation. So we have to continue where we are good, but we also have to understand where we can simplify, particularly for beneficiaries, but also for our managing authorities, for ourselves, where we can say, yes, the accountability will be there, but we can simplify, we can work better, we can apply more simplified costs, for example, do more results-oriented schemes, also make more joint audits, which we do now together with DG Ample, for example. And in that sense, this continuity versus simplification is kind of our two guiding principles when we propose the new regulation for post-2020. And I hope that this is important. And also, why? Because we also really are concerned and we very much want to help in terms of administrative capacity. And it's not just about managing authorities, it is about all levels of governance, regional, urban authorities, local authorities, and also local groups, which we support through CLLDs now, but in future, I will explain later, it will be even more opportunities. What is good also that we participate fully in a semester is the fact that through the European semester in their documents, they recognize the need. They recognize that there are regional disparities and that some investment needs to target these regional disparities and also regional needs or territorial needs. I mean, this is something which we will come to in the end of our presentation, but this is an absolutely very important point, because normally in a semester you have thematic recommendations, but now we will also try to design some CSRs for investment, mentioning also the regional disparities and need to deal with that. And obviously we will be talking about funds more in details. Apart from this dialogue and building on what we have, and you will hear under other policy objectives exactly what we are talking about under policy objective 1, because we have tried to streamline the whole system. So instead of 11 thematic objectives, we propose only 5. 4 are the usual suspects. The 5th one I will talk later. It's a new policy objective, Europe Closer to Citizens. And we also try to streamline the need for cooperation. And I want to stress it in my opening speech, because it's not in a silos or isolation where we can achieve great results. We have to compare to comparable regions, to advanced regions, to other countries. What we can do with funds also stimulate cooperation, not just for functional territories within the member states, but also for like macro-regional cooperation, for working between regions in different member states across borders in Europe, stimulate the so-called ETC, European Territorial Cooperation, but not just through ETC programs, but also through our mainstream investment. And this is something I wanted to say from the beginning is extremely important for us. I will pass the floor now to my colleague, Katarina, from the director in DG Ample, and so we will go ahead. And I think in the end of our presentation, we'll have enough time to exchange views, and you can ask us questions, make your comments and suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you, Normand, and thank you. Hello again. I guess I have the privilege now to present good outcomes of the implementation of the EU funds in Lithuania. And as you could see, and I would like to give a title to our presentation, and it would be Repetitio est mater studiorum, For those who learned Latin, you will know what it means, but it means that there will be lots of repetition of what we spoke this morning, and there will be lots of future-oriented discussion, I hope, especially after our presentations. So what are the achievements of cohesion policy in Lithuania? We can see that GDP per capita, and we spoke about it in the morning, has increased almost to 80% in 2017, or still to see what was it in 2018. But we also see that the contributions and the impact of the ESI investments could be seen up to 3%. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's a big higher, but 3 would be average. So with this, having this in mind, we can really look upon next programming perspective, but not only next programming perspective, the one that will follow as well. So this is what we wanted to point out as great achievements. Before I go to the concrete results and to the concrete numbers, maybe just to say that you have selected so far 71% of your operations, so it means still 30% to be identified, tendered, and contracted. What you pay to beneficiaries, 30%, and what you pay by EC, it's 30%. Here you are in a quite better position maybe than some other member states which are really struggling, and all of you who are working in the managing authority, you know the famous M+3 target, and when you reach it somewhere in the end of December, you feel like you really conquered something and like you really did your best. You managed it, of course, without any problems last year. I hope this year will not be problematic as well, although you will need to speed up a little bit the payment to the beneficiary and actually the actual reimbursement and payment requests. Besides these wonderful percentages, this is what we really consider important and what we see as something that we want to highlight here. So the support was approved for almost 5,000 businesses and for over 2,050 firms working with the research institutions. We saw this morning your Vice Minister was presenting that last year you had around 500 new startups. I hope some of the startups were supported by the ESI funds, especially the ESTF, maybe through the subsidies of public employment service for self-employment, maybe through some other means, but it's really great that you invest in the SMEs. Over 54,000 households with improved energy efficiency and lower bills. This is important when having in mind also the regional disparities and regional challenges, also to promote it in each and every area of Lithuania. 76 upgraded health institutions that will provide improved services to 220 patients. We know that this is the part of 10 years plan and still many challenges to be undertaken in this field. 110,000 pupils could improve their skills in formal and informal education. And here we know that many activities are done, especially in the area of informal and non-formal education. So it is to see how in future you want to proceed. We also see a need to address the formal education as we spoke this morning, and I'm sure in the future, and when you see what we identified as the priorities under the thematic objective 4, you will see that education has a significant part there. Activation measures to over 90,000 unemployed and including 40,000 young people, mostly as the results of our youth guarantee program and the activities how to get them as soon as possible after becoming unemployed or after finishing the education to either continue education or go to the labor work or go to the workforce. More than 10,000 employees upgraded their knowledge and skills, very important at various levels, national, regional, municipal as well. And 200,000 people received food packages together with measures supporting their social inclusion. And you know that FEAD is an important part of the DG Ample portfolio. fund for the most deprived, for the aid of the most deprived, having different aspects, food and material assistance, important to have it in mind for the future activities as well, and we'll speak about it in a while. We decided jointly with the DG Regio, when discussing how to organize these launching events, to select few projects who are really maybe representing your achievements, but are also kind of catching different aspects of our funding priorities as well. It's not easy. It's like you ask mother which child is the most favorite one, which is never, there is no answer on that. So we love all of our projects, but I would like to point out some that really show the added value of the EU funds. One is the Dream School. So this is a model how actually to secure that education is more accessible, that children find more, I would say, ease and nice environment in which they want to learn, in which they want to study and participate. And so through these projects, this was the pilot phase, and in the pilot phase, 7 schools were actually slightly refurbished, because these are not the big investments. It's just creating some reading spots or some cozy corners during the breaks between hours, but it has proven that it's really working well, that the children feel more confident, that they feel that they could really relate to the environment that they are in. And now we are very happy that another 109 schools are going to be supported through this project, and this will also increase the quality of your educational system, and this will also decrease inequality between different regions and different cities as well. The other project, which falls into the DG Regio competence, is reconstruction of Via Baltica. I had to ask my colleagues several times, is it really that 70% less accidents are expected due to the renovated and safer highway? You did the calculation. We are really looking forward to see if this will really become true. Even smaller numbers would be highly appreciated, but it is up to you to set the high goals and then to reach and to achieve them. Supporting the institutionalization in Lithuania is a project that is very important to the directorate that I lead, and the deinstitutionalization is not an easy project. It's not easy first from the various topics, because you need to secure sufficient facilities for persons who are going to be deinstitutionalized, and then you also need to secure additional workforce and additional engagement of the different professions and different population to support persons who were deinstitutionalized. So it's also not an easy topic when it comes to 2 major cohorts. One is children, and the other one are persons with disabilities. But we are very happy with the results, and the results says that number of children in institutional care has decreased from 4,086 to 2,954 at the end of 2017. And we are even hoping that the figures for 2018 are even higher and bigger, and that the decrease, especially when it comes to the children, but also with the persons with disability, will increase or decrease when it comes to the institutions that they are staying in. With the deinstitutionalization, I would like to say that we had large discussions with our colleagues in the Regio, and in the future programming period, we are also going to support such activities. We know that there is cohort that will not be able, that will probably never be able to be deinstitutionalized. So for this cohort, it is important that the facilities that they remain in are really adequate, are really providing sufficient level of decent living conditions in order, and please have that in mind when proposing your future activities. Also, although the accent is indeed into taking the persons from institutions to the community or to the home care centers or to some other long-term care institutions, and we will come to the long-term care in a while. So what is the future of cohesion policy architecture? How many of you are involved in the preparation or in commenting the regulations and MFF? Could I see? Okay. Great. So you know everything that I'm speaking about now, and you can compliment me a bit later, or you can ask difficult questions, and I know you have many of difficult questions. I read carefully what was your position on the MFF and what are the points that we might have a difference in opinion. But what it is going to be, the CPR, the Common Provision Regulation, is the regulation covering all 7 funds of the European Union, including the ERDF, Cohesion Fund, ESF Plus, and I will explain Plus a little bit later, Maritime and Fisheries Fund, but also so-called, we call them the home funds, Asylum and Migration Fund, International Security, and Border Management and Visa Instrument. So all of these funds have some joint rules for the delivery, and all of these funds, of course, then have some different rules of delivery which are specified in their specific regulations. Before I go to the specific regulations, it's important to underline the importance of Code of Conduct on Partnership, which is our compass, which is our guiding principle when it comes to the preparation, to identification, preparation, and then, of course, implementation of funds. We are even going to insist a bit more on the participatory approach when it comes to the implementation of funds. For example, there are still some member states that do not have the members of the civil society in the monitoring committees, or not all the stakeholders are represented in. So those of you who have seen the proposal of the CPR regulation know that we insist on these topics, and you know that we push a lot for the real and true partnership, because indeed, as we spoke this morning about the strategies, many good strategies could be written, but if not implemented properly, then they will just remain the ink on the paper. So the ERDF and Cohesion Fund regulation sets specific objectives from PO1, PO2, PO3, PO5, and I will tell you in the next slide what are those objectives. We have also territorial cooperation, including external assistance, although you will hear a little bit later, and Norman is going to speak about territorial cooperation, so I'm not going to go into it. And the ESF Plus regulation, you see we have this huge big plus, because we decided to merge all the, I would say, human resources development programs into one program. So we have ESF, FEAD, and Youth Employment Initiative as the shared managed programs. So it means jointly with the member states, or the member states implement them. And we have EASY and Health, which will remain directly managed from the Brussels for piloting of our social innovation calls, different policy objectives in the area of social policy and health. ESF Plus is the tool for the implementation of the pillar of social rights. We spoke about pillar when we were discussing the social scoreboard, how it is two levels of the implementation, one at the EU level and the other one at the national member states level. Policy reform, social innovation, and transnational cooperation will remain as well as it is now. And for all those of you who wanted to ask me, maybe if the FEAD is going to have a difficult indicators like the ESF has, the answer is no. FEAD will remain easily managed fund and easily managed specific priority. And what we want to achieve is that we simplify the rest of the ESF plus. Here are the future cohesion policy objectives. First, second, third, and fifth are run by ERDF and Cohesion Fund, and the fourth one is run by the ESF. So first one is a Smarter Europe, about innovative and smart economic transformation. Second one is the Greener, Low Carbon Europe. Third is a More Connected Europe. Fourth is More Social Europe. And fifth is Europe Closer to Citizens. As you could see, and as your authority have already received information, all 5 priorities are selected to be proposed for financing in Lithuania, and our future activities will be around those 5 priorities. But this also leaves us that we would have to focus on some priorities more than on the others, because you know what is the amount of the funds that you have received. I will tell you this in 2 slides. So, to come back, what the future cohesion policy is going to be, and for those working in the managing authority, I'm sure that your life is much simpler now when you see that it's going to be modern, flexible, and simple. But indeed, we wanted to touch upon some aspects that we also from the Brussels saw that are quite complex and complicated, and wanted to see it much more simplified. So you know that focus will be on smart, low carbon, inclusive growth, but with a strong impact on the strong connection with the social policy and the social pillar. A link to the semester, I don't have to say much about it, but so the last 2 years of the programming period are not going to be divided among priority areas, are going to be kept like in a separate basket, and are just going to be used after the midterm review, which will be in 2024, which comes to the midterm review flexible of cohesion and cohesion policy. The enabling conditions are going to replace the ex-ante conditionalities. You know, now we had general ex-ante and specific ex-ante, so now we will have less enabling conditions. What is extremely important to have in mind is the one related, and Angela is going to speak about it, the smart specialization policy. Then in the area of employment social policy, of course, the strategic framework for the LMPs, which are supported through the funds, but also strategic framework for poverty reduction, inclusions of persons with disability. And we are also going to pay attention to the general, so-called previous general ex-ante conditionalities, but not in such a way that it was dealt in this programming period. We wanted to, the money reserve, if I could call it money reserve, would be kept also for the cases of changed circumstances. If anything occurs, or we have been facing the big migrant crisis in the 2015, and we hope that it will not be repeated, that all the migrations are going to be in the control environment, but we cannot predict what might happen in 5 or 6 years, or the changes in globalization and economy due to whatever would be the reasons. So you will be able to switch, to add additional funds, or it will be easier to switch between the investment priorities and specific objectives. What will be simpler? We think by securing that all the funds are in one, it will be easier and faster to program. It is the wish of the Commission that we finalize our activities when it comes to the programs in mid-2020. So that would mean that in a few weeks, when you will receive the letter from Director General from Regio and Director General from Employment, which would actually start the real negotiations, we would expect that our mutual discussion will start as soon as possible, and then to have the first drafts towards the end of year or first quarter next year, so that by the mid we could have the finally agreed or final versions of the programs, and then programs should be approved by the end of 2020. That would secure this time the really easy and smooth transformation from the present programming period to the next one. We saw what delays cost in many of the member states, and what delays cause in many member states, so we would really like to avoid it. And we also see that one of the simplification would be that no accreditation would be needed if you wanted to remain with the same structure or similar structure. If you wanted to change the structure, of course, it's up to you, and you have free will to do whatever you think that will be working best for Lithuania, but you will then have, of course, to deal with your audit authority, but no further accreditation is going to be needed except what is there. And I think this is one of the most interesting slides. And this is the money that we are speaking about when we speak about Lithuania. So we have the total allocation for cohesion policy, 6,239 million. And out of these numbers is 2.85 million for ERDF and 1.029 for ESF plus. For the thematic concentration, you see that we have proposed some thematic concentration. So for PO1, 35%, and Angela explained everything about it. PO2, 65%. For the sustainable urban development, at least 6%. And when it comes to the ESF, 25% from the regulation should be devoted to social inclusion, at least 2% for the FEAD activities, so food, material assistance, and supporting activities. We also say to each and every member state, please also, when discussing the FEAD, maybe to use ESF plus funds for supporting activities, so you have a bigger share that you can give for the food and material assistance if needed, and this is really for the most deprived, and at least 10% for youth employment if the ratio of needs, so not if the ratio of youth unemployment is at a certain level, but if the ratio of needs will be below a certain level, but we will know it in the end of 2019, actually in the beginning of 2020. And now I would like to give floor to Angela to lead you through the investment priorities in PO1, PO2, PO3, and then I'll be back.
Thank you, Katarina. And good afternoon, everybody. It's always a pleasure also for me to come and join you. I see also many familiar faces, notably from the monitoring committees, and I'm glad to be here today on stepping and launching a new programming period. So in June, we will still have the monitoring committee for the current programming period, but in parallel, we'll be already launching and starting the negotiations of the new programming period. I think, well, we are now finally coming to maybe the last part of today's agenda, which will be unveiling the policy objectives and investment priorities for the next programming period. And we will do it in tandem. I will run through policy objective 1 and 3. Katerina will follow policy objective 4, and Normunds will take you throughout policy objective 5. But before doing that, before unveiling the famous Annex D, I will still ask you for a bit of patience, and I would like to run you a bit through the investment-related challenges in Lithuania. Why so? We have had today a very extensive presentation by our colleagues on all the strengths and the very good economic performance of Lithuania, but also some of the challenges ahead. And I was happy to see that there was a kind of broad agreement between the Commission and Lithuanian government on the way forward. We discussed all the challenges related to all the economic sphere, including, of course, the social and the environment sphere. But, of course, all these cannot be tackled by the cohesion policy. And then Normus also explained that now the proposal for MFF is embracing many different financial instruments. So what we have done is that we have tried to translate the Lithuanian challenges and the analysis made in a broader perspective, combined with the achievements, and that Katarina has just presented, the achievements of the current programming period, including even the projection of still the achievements to come, because we are in the middle of the programming period and we expect still a huge, although you are quite advanced in selecting projects and in terms of payments, but still we still think that until 2023, 2025, there will be still many achievements to be reached under the current programming period, who will benefit the economy of Lithuania. So basically, we have tried to combine the current challenges with the expected still implementation results for the current programming period, and also combining with, of course, the new priorities of the new cohesion policy. So here in my two next slides, I will just run through maybe as a keywords, because I don't want to take you more time, because we have discussed that all of them this morning. But maybe I think in a pedagogical manner, I will run through in order the investment-related challenges, and the order is mainly the order of the policy objectives. So you will be able to see how we are going to relate and what are the challenges we are trying to address throughout the cohesion policy funding priorities for Lithuania. So the main one, which it relates, of course, to a smart Europe and a smart transformation of the Lithuanian economy, is that the main challenge is that we discussed this morning is that the innovation performance remains very low in comparing to the EU average. I think we were talking about 70% of the EU average this morning. I mean, Lithuania being a moderate, what we call a moderate innovator. But there, what we also see is that there is low investment, both at the private sector and the public sector. And I think here also even the EU 2020 targets are not even achieved by half of the overall national target, which was 1.9% GDP. And I think you are around 0.7%. So still a long way to go, mainly on the private sector, but also from the public investment, which also we see that is very scattered in many broader priorities. And I think one of the messages also today will be to focus on some priorities. Then another challenge that we also have discussed this morning is the SMEs' competitiveness, the low productivity, and the way that they are not integrated in the domestic or international value chains. And we would like also to address this by trying to raise their critical mass and to develop large-scale innovations. From the digitalization front, this is also another challenge to boost the innovation and the competitiveness of Lithuania. We have seen this morning that Lithuania performs well overall in terms of broadband coverage, but the uptake is the one which is lagging behind, both in terms of households, but also in terms of firms. There is also low share of ICT specialists in total unemployment. There is digital public services, but still we have some doubts about the quality and the interoperability of the e-services. And of course, the open data also is lagging behind. All this together, where we discussed this morning also with the skill mismatches, but the skill mismatches which maybe are more important at the level of this innovation field. Coming to the challenges in the environment or energy or greener Europe, although the emission reduction targets for EU 2020 have been also reached by Lithuania, there is maybe need now to focus a bit to the long term rather than on the long-term decarbonization efforts. And here we see that Lithuania remains one of the most energy and resource inefficient member state, where two main sectors lagging behind, which is residential and transport. So here we would like to address also the challenge of the very inefficient housing and public buildings, and also to move on renewable energies in electricity, but mainly also in transport sector. We will also address the waste management, where Lithuania has done a lot of progress, but still we consider that there is a need for further addressing the separate collection and the recycling in order to move further in the circular economy. On policy objective 3, we also have discussed the connectivity priorities this morning, and I think, despite also the figures that Katerina showed and the photos of Via Baltica, we still think that the transport sector performance is far below the EU average. There is still a lot to be done in TEN-T road and rail network completeness. There is also need for RTD investment in transport. There is a lot to do in terms of sustainability of the transport system, including the renewable energies in transport. We remain very low. I think the EU 2020 target of 10% will not be reached, as you are at 3.6 currently. And then road safety. Road safety remains a challenge, although we are still doing some projects in order to decrease the fatality. Lithuania ranks still very, very high in the road fatality rates. Regarding the digital connectivity, there is also, as I said, there is maybe broad coverage, but there is still an important digital divide between rural and urban areas that we would like to address. Concerning PO5, I think also this morning we have discussed and we have seen the stream progress, convergence progress that Lithuania has done over the last years. But although it is very, very impressive, I mean, what we see, and I think here is the regional policy which is speaking, is that the potential and the benefits of this growth has mainly been concentrated in Vilnius and Kaunas. I think also DG ECFIN presented the map this morning, where we have Vilnius at 109, almost 110% above EU average, Kaunas being around 75%, but what we have also to take note is that predominantly all the rural regions are around 50%, and I even noted here that the target county is around 42%. So here I think this is a big call from our side to really try to address these regional disparities. Also because it's not that they are big and they are the highest in the European Union, but what is also more worrying is that these regional disparities have been increased. And I think the trend is to be increased, these disparities, and I think this is where we will also need to discuss how this trend can be reverted. And we have discussed also inequalities this morning, but here I'm talking about inequalities among regions, but it's not only income inequalities among regions, there is also an effect on employment, unemployment, and all these are correlated with the demographic trends. And we also have discussed the demographic trends, but we'll also note figures like there is, in some countries, there is 25% decline in demography. So these are the figures and the challenges we would like also to share with you and to discuss with you throughout the whole negotiation process. Coming to the investment-related challenges for PO4, for the social agenda, I will also run through because I think Katerina will expand more when you will be presenting the policy objective 4. We have discussed this morning the population of Lithuania, which is shrinking with two main drivers, emigration and aging, although emigration trend seems to be changing, but it will not be sufficient to revert this population decline. We have extensively discussed today education and training, where we would like this to be consolidated and to improve the quality, and mainly, I think we also discussed this morning the efficiency of the education system. And here we would like maybe also to pay attention to the vocational training and to the adult learning, which we think it will be very important. The idea being that the education system is sufficiently responsive to the labor market needs and the skill shortages that we have been discussing this morning. We also have discussed this morning that the social safety net in Lithuania remain ineffective, and they are not able to reduce poverty, social inclusion, and high inequality. So the situation of the elderly, unemployed, and persons with disabilities continue to be challenging. And then final challenge that we would like to address is the health outcomes, where we still would like to improve the access to good quality, affordable, and long-term care services. So these are the challenges from our perspective, from DG Regio and DG Employment perspective, that we would like to address. Sorry, I've forgotten to, sorry. So these were the challenges for PO4, the social challenges. And now I'm starting to present to you the Commission priorities for the cohesion policy found in Lithuania. The first, and I think, as we have also, I think, Normunds presented this afternoon, there is a strong call for focusing and concentrating the finding resources on these main 5 policy objectives, the main being a smarter Europe. And the idea here is to support and to ensure the innovative and smart industrial transformation of the Lithuanian economy. I think these 2 elements were clearly addressed this morning by my Vice Minister of Economy and Innovation. And I think when he was referring that, Lithuania would like to be reaching 100% of the GDP EU average by 2030, 2035, I think this is maybe the policy objective and the priority to pay attention to it. The way we see it is addressing 4 main objectives. The first one is to increase the research and innovation capacity in order to build up the necessary innovation ecosystems, connecting better all the stakeholders which should be working together from the supply and the demand side, research institutions, business, NGOs, universities, academia, all the stakeholders involved in the economic transformation of the country. We would like to move towards not be locked on what we call the middle income trap, and to be able to move into what we call value-added economy, to move to support more innovative firms. I saw that we have, I think, a question later on what is an innovative firm, but to be able to propose and to promote innovative firms with highest potential, and the instrument to do that, we believe, is the smart specialization strategies. Smart specialization strategies will be designed at any level, at national and also regional level. We would like also to strengthen the supply side of research, and as I said, to support the collaborative research between universities and business, and all this with the neighboring countries. We would like to call also for a strong collaboration and work in the value-added chains, not only at the Lithuanian level, but also with your neighboring countries. The second specific objective is to increase the growth and competitiveness of the SMEs. We also discussed this morning that the main engine of the Lithuanian economy are the SMEs, and here the way we see our support will be to support internationalization of the SMEs activities, as I said, moving up in the integration of the global value chains, identify new export markets and cooperation networks and interregional clusters, including cooperation again on maybe neighboring countries or the Baltic states or the Baltic area, and promoting entrepreneurship and fostering the creation of new firms, growth of startups and accelerators. I also understood this morning from the presentation of Vice Minister that you want to double already the number of startups in 2 years, so we will also insist on supporting these growth areas. The third element on this smart Europe is the digitalization, and the idea is to bring, sorry, I keep on forgetting the slides, to bring the benefits of digitalization to citizens, to companies, and to the government. As we said, there is enough good coverage, but you need to increase the uptake on households, on the firms, and to improve the quality and interoperability of the e-services and improve the open data. And the fourth specific objective under this policy objective is a new one. It's a new one for ERDF, which is the skills for smart specialization. This is a new area where ERDF would like to accompany this industrial and innovative transformation of the Lithuanian economy by developing also the necessary new skills. We have discussed, and I think Katerina will still come back with the skills agenda, but here there is a possibility for ERDF to support very, very targeted new skills in order to support mainly the priority areas of the smart specialization strategies. And also to increase the capacity and the skills to manage these smart specialization strategies, both in the public sector, in the research community, and also in the business community. Now I move to the second policy objective, which is dealing with greener Europe. And here our goal and our proposal is to ensure the full transition to a low-carbon circular economy of Lithuania and moving towards a more sustainable production and consumption partners. Here we are proposing three specific objectives. One is dealing with energy efficiency and renewable energy. We say that the best and the cheapest energy remains the one who has not been used. So here we would like to address the reduction of energy consumption, mainly by investing in energy efficiency in buildings and in businesses, and also to increase the uptake of the renewable energies. Concerning the transition to circular economy, Lithuania is also starting the process towards the circular economy. You have done a lot of progress in terms of recycling over the last current years, but here we would like you to achieve a more ambitious recycling and landfilling targets. And here, for example, we see also a good field for getting synergies between this policy objective, meeting greener Europe, but also with linking it with smart and innovation, where eco-innovation could be one of the eco-green solutions could be one of the avenues. And finally, climate change, as climate change affects also Lithuania as all the member states, especially with the coastal erosion and the floods. This will be also an avenue to finance your national climate plan in order to move ahead on the climate change agenda. And I would like also to stress at this point also the need to cooperate also with the Baltic Sea countries in this policy objective. Now moving to Connected Europe, and I think we also discussed this morning the need for a high-quality transport infrastructure for Lithuania to take full advantage of the single market, being also a peripheral country with low population density. A well-functioning and interconnected transport system becomes a key element for the economic activity and for the competitiveness of the country. Here we would like our, let's say, proposal under this policy objective will be to focus on three main specific objectives. First will be to finalize or to move on, and let's say, I don't think we will be able to finalize, but to move on the completeness of the trans-European networks, core networks, both in rail and road, making a particular attention to cross-border sections with neighboring countries, bringing also the national sections to meet US standards and to also address the regional development needs. Also from this perspective, we would like also to address the road safety, the energy efficiency and the environmental issues which are at stake, as I said, by maybe increasing also the renewable energy share in the transport sector. The second specific objective, as we said, as we also discussed, that there is the concentration of the population in cities and surrounding areas, and is putting a lot of pressure on urban mobility systems, will be to invest in sustainable and efficient urban transport system. Here, we would like also to call for an integrated territorial development strategies where you will address the urban mobility, maybe not necessarily only in the urban area, but also in the surrounding areas. Here, this could be also a very good way to make this bridge between the rural and urban areas. And I think Normus already mentioned the functional areas approach, where I think he will detail later on, but could be also addressed through this specific objective. And then finally, the digital connectivity. As we said, the broadband coverage in general is quite good in Lithuania. There is still an issue in rural and less populated areas, and in order to bridge this divide between the rural and urban areas, we are also proposing some actions to be financed under the digital connectivity. So this is from my side, Katarina.
Oh, yes, we are here. So I'll be very brief because I think we spoke a lot about these social policy challenges and how to address them. And it would be really great to hear what you think that the remaining challenges are, and how to address them, and what you think that it might be a good way forward. So what we put in the employment area is, of course, improve access to employment to all of those who can and will work. We also propose that you take on board the social economy and the social enterprise, especially in the light of attracting and returning to the labor market those that have been away from the labor market for a while, or persons with disabilities. The most successful social enterprises at the EU level are those that are either working for or with persons that represent different vulnerable groups. And it is, of course, up to you and up to your authorities to see how much of the social economy are you going to embrace. But social economy cannot be something that is imposed. One would have to want to work differently, and one would have to want to do the business in a different way in order to be sure that the return to the society or to the groups that he or she is working is there and visible. Support labor mobility across sectors and regions. It is quite visible why we have put it and why we identified this area. We have been speaking about regional disparities the whole day. Different areas require different actions. Retaining especially certain provisions, certain occupations, such as doctors, teachers, etc., in the local communities of the extreme importance, and additional measures need to be taken in this regard as well. And strengthen the capacity of social partners. We haven't been speaking a lot about social partnership today, but I noticed, and my colleagues have told me, that there are several social partners in the room, but this is in light of the partnership principle that we have been promoting, not only at the tripartite level, I would say, but also at the bipartite level, and social partnership really represents the core of the employment policies in each and every member state. When it comes to the education, we want to improve the access, quality, of course, effectiveness, and labor market relevance of the educational system for all the reasons that have been discussed before. And we, of course, are promoting flexible upskilling and reskilling. And this is the topic that we will be speaking a lot for next year and a half. Now, the Finnish presidency that is taking the presidency from July will start the whole paradigm of your economy of well-being, in which a big part of the economy of well-being is to secure adequate and skilled workforce. Then the next Croatian presidency is taking the priority of the presidency is upskilling and reskilling. So many events, many activities are going to be organized around upskilling and reskilling, leading with finalizing its activities within the council conclusions and also addressing it at the various topics. And here, as I said this morning, we don't look only on those that are unemployed or that are in transition or that actually belong to something that in the past we used to call flexicurity, but it's still so much applicable and we have to mention it also several times. So those in transitions between the jobs and between different occupations, I would say even now. Better anticipating change and addressing new skills requirement is something that make difference and something that make put Lithuania in a different position and in a better position than the others. In the area of social inclusion and health, I'm sure the employability of vulnerable groups is really now being mentioned but many times and addressed from the various angles, but this is definitely something that would foster the active inclusion, that would support the real inclusion and that would decrease in inequalities in a country. Address material deprivation through food and basic material assistance. So basically meaning continue with FEAD, improve the implementation of FEAD. Those of you who are dealing with FEAD, we had the FEAD network that was just held last Friday, and the FEAD network this time focused particularly on simplifying processes, simplifying procedures, introducing simplified cost options as a unit costs as well there, and the whole network is developing quite well in order to be quite simple and easy manageable fund. Then reduce housing deprivation and improve access to social housing. For those of you who wanted to have a housing and social housing in this programming perspective, that was impossible, of course, because it wasn't open, it was not on the list to be finalized, to be financed, but this time, I think I would say, we've got smarter, we recognize the real need, what the Europe needs, not only in Lithuania, but all across the Europe. So the housing is one very important aspect. We speak here about social housing, but we can also speak about affordable social housing or affordable housing as general, because sometimes it's very difficult for some groups like young people, like single mothers or some other groups to get the access to the affordable housing. So we have to see the broad picture. But the social housing means, again, this prioritizing, and when we spoke about taxes and when we spoke about how to secure that inequality is addressed, we have to have the social aspect in line. And also with social housing comes the eradication of homelessness. We are going to put quite high objectives at the level of the EU into really eradicating homelessness, and in this respect we are going to work much more, and you will be able to use the funds from the ERDF, but also for ESF Plus for many supporting activities, especially when it comes to the sound financial management, to some health-related aspects, for example, when it comes to the homelessness or some other aspects that could be seen as the accompanying measures, so to speak, to the social housing or housing in general. And then also we are developing a special product under the InvestEU. We didn't discuss a lot about InvestEU today because it's the program that is being in a process of developing and adopting and negotiating at EU level. But InvestEU would actually mean different financial instruments put in one, divided in several products. One of the products would be social affordable housing, and which is being developed by DG Employment, which would mean different either guarantee schemes or subsidized interest rates or subsidized different kind of loans for persons that would want to go under the program, and the member states could choose either among our products that are going to be developed, or you could propose something of your own within the social windows area. And the other products that are going to be developed, important for us, is social infrastructure. And we are also developing one product when it comes to the accessibility of persons with disabilities, and one special product for childcare facilities. So this is important to have in mind in order to secure the real work-life balance. And we've seen the question, it was on Slido this morning, how when Lithuania having the full equality when it comes to the employment rates, gender gap remains in certain sectors, but how could it be better addressed, etc., etc. So the work-life balance is extremely important, and with the work-life balance comes the question of preschool education and preschool facilities, but also long-term care, because we know who takes care mostly of dependent household members. So this should also seen as the broader picture. And here we come to the last point that I'm going to address, and this is improved quality and effectiveness of the healthcare and long-term care services, but having in mind also the workforce in both in healthcare and in long-term care services. And now I give the floor to Normans to finalize our small presentation, and then we will have a discussion.
How are you? It wasn't exactly a small presentation, was it? You've seen the movie Theatre, which is a Latvian movie based on this British novel. They say the bigger the actor, the bigger is the pause. I'm trying to take a pause now. A lot of good ideas, right? But now it's time to wake up. Because this is all you heard before mostly. This is a continuation of our good work under the implementation of the funds, structural funds programs, ESF, ERDF, Cohesion Fund. But we have something brand new which we are proposing where we need your help and cooperation. And this idea, I think, is worth $1 million because it's something new, because what you hear is always very good and very important for different development of education and different other fields. But what to do if you are just a poor city or rural area and you really are lost? And there we come to PO5. We wanted to create something, and we had a big debate whether it's worth to become a policy objective or if it should remain at the level of implementation tools, as currently we do have ITIs and CLLDs. These are integrated territorial investments, but they are just tools to implement other policy objectives. And really, I insisted that we have this as a policy objective, because I think it deserves to be recognized that in the end, our people will benefit from the development of the places where they live and the cooperation between these places, not in isolation, but really something that we call now functional territory in a very clever term, something that we call rural-urban spillover effects or linkages. And this is something that is there, but it's difficult to target really needs under these particular circumstances. And this is why Policy Objective 5, I think, gives us a great opportunity to discuss how we do this, how we help our cities and rural areas to cooperate, to create real functional territories between big cities and areas around, between the 5 or 6 small towns with the surrounding areas. How we address the needs of specific territories. Lithuania doesn't have mountains, but some countries do, and they have mountainous areas which have specific needs. We have islands, we have everything. And we've been criticized, and we are the regional DG, and so I think it's very appropriate to have a policy objective which is called Europe Closer to Citizens. But under this, basically, it's a place-based approach. We want to discuss with you. And I know that Lithuania has done a great job in working on functional areas and trying to stimulate the cooperation between different places. So we need you to come and tell us what is it that you lack. Of course, there is a thematic concentration, and PO5 for the moment is not included at all in thematic concentration. But I think still with the money that is left beyond that, we can do a lot. And we can do what matters most to people who live in our places. And this is why I say the Commission sees this as an opportunity. And I want to have a serious discussion coming from you, proposals coming from you, how we can help you to develop functional territories and cooperation between different parts of your country, beyond their administrative borders, within their administrative borders, and also, with other countries like cross-border. By the way, on roads, I hope that next time I take the road from Polish border to Vilnius, my level of fear is at least 80% lower, because I really had hard times in arriving in Vilnius yesterday. I'm not suggesting roads should be priority for our investment, but okay, capital from Polish border to the capital, Vilnius, we should do something about it, no? Anyway, as you see, I'm in a little bit of a relaxed mood already, because my colleagues already basically have said everything. I want PO5 to be with substance, and I want it to really make difference. So it's not just about supporting administrative capacity or some, measures of cooperation. It's about finding out what is lacking, actually, what is lacking from the PO1 to 4, what needs to still be done, because the territories and our people need that. I hope we can go, we can address issues of security of public spaces, road safety, including, addressing specific needs of marginal areas, of vulnerable communities, everything that is a problem. And we know the cities are driving forces of our economy. That's not a secret. But we also know there are problems in cities, and we know that they don't cooperate with areas around them sometimes. So there has to be a push. But there we will succeed only if we work together with you. It's interesting that we also have an earmarking for the ERDF, which is 5% for urban strategies. We propose 6%. Parliament wants to extend it to 12% and include also territorial earmarking. I don't know. We will see. That earmarking is not PO5. That earmarking is really to stimulate where we have urban areas which anyway implement all those beautiful policy objectives and measures on the ground, that they can actually choose the right priorities. So this earmarking is really for cities becoming real actors, like an intermediate bodies, or really someone light intermediate body in this current period, when they can choose the right projects. But it could be also part of the policy objective 5. But PO5 is much broader than that. As I said, there we can talk about many things, and we really need your inputs to fill it with substance. This was what I wanted to say on the policy objective 5, because otherwise we talk about supporting functional territories, but sometimes when we see the thematic concentration, we are a little bit lost. And it's true that also, which is interesting, in parallel, we have ongoing huge work on EU urban agenda. Now we are talking the member state level, how to converge it with the territorial agenda. And there, under urban agenda, which is totally not linked to funds, but regio and urban, and I'm responsible for that in the Commission. And we really see that there are 14 partnerships with cities, NGOs, governments, and the Commission. And these partnerships are producing concrete action plans, and one of the horizontal principles is better funding. So I think we should also take a look what comes out of this huge EU urban agenda and these partnerships, and in future also from territorial agenda. But the direction is clear. We should stimulate cooperation regardless of administrative borders to create functional territories. I think to me this is key, and to me this would be the key investment under PO5. Let's figure out in which fields, how we do that. Not necessarily, I hope, through ITIs, although in some cases the good implementation of ITIs. And I also really hope we can build on CLLDs, because I really want to see also supporting local initiatives where they make sense. I mean, it's not just about building a beautiful fountain, it's building a beautiful fountain if it's part of your territorial development strategy, okay? If you plan to attract thousands of jobs to that fountain, it could happen that we support it. I should stop, because otherwise you will be amazed how much I can say about PO5. So I'm supposed to now go further. I talked about macro regions. We want to mainstream this, not just ETCs. We do work on the cross-border programs, on output papers. You will get them soon for cross-border cooperation and then also for transnational programs. But we also want the mainstream programs to be able to support projects which go beyond national borders. It's difficult sometimes, but this is the point of mainstreaming of cooperation. There are identification of factors which are, we call factors for effective delivery. Now we talked about key enabling conditions. We have changed from the heavy ex-ante conditionality mechanisms to much lighter mechanism called enabling conditions. But I want to say that this is very important because this was part of our reform, is not to go for standalone investment, but all investment to reach some kind of a result within the strategy. And this is not just where I talk about urban and territorial, this is where I talk about smart specialization, about your national transport master plan connected to the 10T core network or comprehensive network development, and so on and so forth. So key enabling conditions remain, and I think we will propose much stricter start of investment, I mean not start of investment if they are not met, because for the current period we had a complete disaster, which, you know, with action plans and compromises, so we didn't suspend any investment, but it's maybe good, we learn from that. I think in future we have to make sure that these key enabling conditions really are in place before we start our investment. And there are, you know, many things that have been proposed today. We are working a lot on simplified cost options for ERDF. I will go also in July to open a big seminar with our managing authorities. We want them to lead to real simplification. We talk about social innovation experimentation. It's difficult sometimes to do it under programs, but we have to try. I have a beautiful instrument, Urban Innovative Actions, where we experiment. So far, the auditors haven't cut a cent out of this instrument, but okay, it's directly run by us together with our French authority and the cities. But we need to have also places where we can make innovative solutions as an experiment, and then if it works, then mainstream them through our programs. So yes, for experimentation, of course, social innovation. Capacity, I already mentioned. Financial instruments have been mentioned. Again, I hope on financial instruments we can have a simpler system. Within our funds, we can rely more on EU Invest. We can rely more on existing instruments rather than making our own rules, which seems to be the case for the moment. It's a hope. But let's work together on that. Lithuania has great experience in doing different financial instruments. And of course, I have to mention public procurement because it's still, sometimes we have surprises in this area and sometimes we have to come up with corrections. And that hurts and that should be avoided because they might lead to decommitment. Luckily, this year I had only one country decommitting, but you know, in future we have to be aware that there are areas where attention has to be paid all the time, particularly public procurement and how it's implemented through the national legislation and practices, okay? So we conclude, finally, you will receive a letter, I mean your country, your managing authority, from our DGs inviting you to design the roadmap. Last time it took us 1 year and 9 months for Lithuania from the start of informal dialogue to approving partnership agreement and program. And this was good because Lithuania was in the first group of countries. I hope it will be the case. We don't know when the MFF and the regulatory framework will be approved. We can hope this year, next month, maybe in 2 years, I don't know. Honestly, there's a lot of negotiations ongoing, but we have to be ready. And this is why today we are launching this dialogue and we will be asking you to give us your roadmap, how you see that the program and the partnership agreement, if you decide to go for it, is prepared on time, hopefully, you know, allowing to implement next period much faster than this one, because I was afraid I would be totally fired or downgraded because the absorption or implementation of ERDF, which is my main, you know, duty, is not happening at all as we planned. Now I hope that, you know, the measures we foreseen, which is continuation of current managing authorities, more simplified costs, you know, we already know what smart specialization is. All these things will help for the next period to start really fast, because this period we were really, really bad start. And maybe it's also us somewhat to blame, but that only shows that I think we have to cooperate more and deeper already now, starting this informal dialogue, setting our priorities clear, and coming up with something that we can all then agree is a good program for Lithuania for structural funds. I think it makes sense what I said now. I really invite you for this dialogue, and also, of course, we expect that all stakeholders, that all NGOs, beneficiaries, everybody will participate in this dialogue through the arrangements of Lithuanian government, of course, and our managing authority. We will be there all the time, and we are ready to work with you. And by the way, even the first time, European Court of Auditors praised us for the informal dialogue for the current period. Very rarely we get praises from the European Court of Auditors. So I can assure you that today is a historic good event, because we are repeating and we are learning from good experience we had for the current period, and just really happy to be in Vilnius, and our team is here. So we invite, I think it's a Lithuanian presentation, and then we have an open talk. So thank you so much again.
We continue our discussion, and now is the time to hear Lithuanian authorities' views on cohesion policy priorities, and including the preliminary roadmap. While our next speaker will be ready to present, I would like to ask you to use your smartphones and participate in a poll, which is running already probably, and answer a question about which out of 5 policy objectives is most relevant to Lithuania in your opinion. Thank you.
Hello everyone. My name is Paulius Baniūnas. I represent Ministry of Finance, EU Investment Department, the managing authority for current programs, and in charge of negotiations for the future programs. Of course, if I would react to all the proposals of the Commission, my presentation wouldn't be small and you will be very tired, but do not be afraid, it will be shorter. Maybe I will touch some more general important aspects. But at the beginning, I should say what is our reaction on a broader scale. I think I can definitely say that we are big fans of EU, and we are big fans of cohesion policy, and of course we understand and we see that cohesion policy has contributed quite a lot to our economic and social development, and we saw these numbers in previous sections. Our GDP per capita growth, very fast convergence compared to other member states, and of course the GDP growth is one aspect, but there are other aspects and other benefits of many other benefits of being in the EU and being in this and implementing cohesion policy, because together with EU funds, we have gained a lot of experience how to deal with investment programs. We had gained experience from other countries, how to solve different kind of problems, how to communicate with social economic partners, with NGOs, how to implement new kinds of schemes of investments, more effective schemes, and so on. So we see that, of course, cohesion policy have contributed a lot to our development, and we see this from our evaluations also, that quite a large part of GDP growth is due to EU funds investments. And of course, we want to continue this trend further, and it was said before that we could aim to reach 100% in 2030 or 2035, hopefully sooner. But one aspect which worries us is actually the decrease of EU funding, which was proposed initially in the initial proposal of the European Commission, and we have quite big challenges ahead of us. These challenges are no less than they were in the beginning of 2007-2013 or at the beginning of this programming period. And we talked about it, that we have big challenges due to demographic trends. We have big challenges in transforming our economy into high added value economy, not falling into the middle income trap. Actually, our challenges are, you can say, even bigger than before, because in the beginning, when we were lacking the basic infrastructure, we could channel the large amounts of investments into quite simple projects, but now we have to find much more innovative approaches to using EU funds. We have much more difficult problems to solve, and I'm afraid that of course, the financial envelope is not the only thing, but still we see the risk that it could not allow us to reach these ambitious goals of convergence as soon as we want to reach them. Another aspect which was also mentioned, the regional disparities in Lithuania, and this is also, of course, we understand this problem, we see it, and one of the reasons why we had adopted a new NUTS 2 classification was because we saw these regional disparities, that one of the counties, Vilnius County, is far ahead of the other Lithuanian regions, and that's why we think that it would be very important in the MFF proposal to take into account this and take into account the new division of Lithuania into two NUTS 2 regions. As regarding the proposal for whole legislative package, we can see that we welcome many things which were introduced, and we can probably say that it's the best proposal which we saw in several programming periods, and it has many kind of introduced many kind of simplifications into procedures which will help us to implement our programs much faster and in more effective way. But we still see some areas where the proposals could be modified further, and this relates to more to the programming stage and the more flexible and simplified programming stage, and to more flexible implementation of programs. We think there is a need to have even more flexibility to allow to react to changing circumstances of social and economic development. Also, we think that the programming exercise in our case could be simplified by having voluntary partnership agreement, and also we think that we should have less constrained thematic concentration. Of course, we understand that the policy objectives of innovation and energy efficiency, climate change are very important, and they are very important for us, but we still, as we saw from previous presentations, we still have quite a lot of challenges to be solved also in other areas, not only in these concerned with innovations and energy efficiency. So more flexibility in our view is necessary. And now regarding the actual proposals on investment priorities and the investment challenges, of course, I cannot comment every proposal, but in general, as we saw, not only us as a managing authority, but of course all the ministries have gone through these proposals, they evaluated them, and in general we can see that we can agree, of course, with these challenges, and we see the same challenges as you do, and we agree with these investment priorities, but of course during negotiations, and this is just a start, we will have to find common ground, common agreement between your proposal and our national strategy. And currently we are working on our national development program. We started to do it, to work on it, we can say that last year, when we initiated a quite wide evaluation of 14 public policy areas. We tried to look at how we are achieving our objectives in different policy areas, and we tried with the help of experts and also with the discussions between different kind of stakeholders. We tried to also look for the proposals, how to solve the problems that we see, and we already have draft proposals of objectives and and possible interventions which could be put on the table for the next programming period. So I think we will, of course, have detailed discussions on these proposals, and we have this year and next year for this process, which will be, of course, very, very interesting, and we hope it will lead to good investment strategy agreed between European Commission and Lithuania. But what I wanted to touch upon is the principles of investment which we currently are promoting and which we see we have to promote in the future, which will help us to have better programs, better investment strategies, and which will help us to better implement them. So I could name several important aspects. Some of them were touched before, and I think are in line with general views that we have to have coherent national framework of national, regional, sectoral strategies in order to use EU funds effectively, of course. We have to initiate major public sector reforms, which we are already doing, this six-pack which was mentioned also, and other kind of reforms, not only those six, but there are several other reforms, important reforms ongoing. And we see that if we want to have fast convergence, it's not enough just to invest EU funds. It's of course necessary, especially in several sectors, especially in education, health, and so on, to have major reforms which will help us to use EU funds effectively, more effectively, and have a bigger impact. Also, if we have an investment strategy, we also are trying to look at how, in what ways we can have as bigger impact and from every invested euro. It means that we have to choose the best alternatives to implement, to achieve our objectives, and we have to look for the best ideas to solve our problems. Because in some cases we see that, and it was mentioned also, there are several sectors where we have where we are lagging behind the EU averages, and where probably the new innovative approaches to solving these problems are needed, and we think that in the future we will have to have a much more robust approach to how we choose alternatives, where to invest EU funds. And also financial instruments, it was also always a priority for us. We can say that we have a success stories here. We can, and other member states can learn from us, and we have also are determined to continue this trend to use financial instruments, repayable support as much as possible. Just in more detail about every aspect which I mentioned, important reforms. So several of these reforms are ongoing currently. These mentioned here are more related to EU funds and what is new in this programming period, and what I think will be very important for the next programming period, that EU funds are quite a lot contributing to these reforms, and we see that we will have a bigger impact of EU funds investments because they are being used together with reforms in different sectors: education, health, also public administration, innovation, and regional reform. Now there are two horizontal reforms which are also very important in terms of investment planning. One is the reform of strategic planning and budgetary planning. As you can see, we are aiming at more coherent planning system. We want to reduce the number of planning documents. We want to have a limited number of priorities and objectives in order to concentrate resources. And we want to have a better link of strategic objectives in our programs with the budget in order to achieve a better result orientation. So, and also we want to integrate planning of all financing sources. So I think this reform also is one of the initiatives which will help us to plan EU funds also more effectively, because they will be planned more coherently with other financing sources, and and we will have a strong and robust national strategy of national development strategy. Also, very important aspect, the regional reform. As we have this problem of big regional disparities, one of the ways which will contribute to solving these problems and taking advantage of the proposals of the Commission for this policy objective number 5 is the initiative of regional reform, which has many aspects, but what I want to mention, the more important ones for EU funds investments, is the coherence of sectoral and regional planning. We want in sectoral strategies to take into account the needs of regions and to have a better link with regional programs. We want to have a more integrated approach to regional investments because ITI tool was, of course, meant for that, but still it was combined from different kind of priority axes, and it was quite a difficult implementing mechanism. And we think that policy objective number 5 will help us to have a more integrated approach and to have to combine the investments from all kinds of sectors and sources which are needed for the development of specific regions. Also, we want the new regional investment strategies not to be bound only by administrative borders, but also to see the functional links, the links which are determined by where the jobs created, to how the people are moving, what is the demand for services, and not to be more effective in delivering these services, and which are needed, and not to look, not to cut the provision of services according to administrative borders. Also, the regional specialization initiative, we think, will also help us to identify the main strengths and of different regions, and our new regional development strategies also will have to take into account the regional specialization, which we are also working on currently. So these also are several aspects which we think will change in significantly how we plan all kinds of investments, not only EU funds, but all investments aimed at regional development. And lastly, several important aspects which we think will enable us to achieve more effective investments and to have a bigger impact from every invested euro. We currently are trying as pilot projects to use cost-benefit analysis not only on the project level and not only for infrastructure projects, but also for measures and initiatives. And we see that it could be beneficial for us for selecting the best alternatives, as I mentioned, the best alternatives, how to meet these challenges and solve these problems. Also, financial instruments, we see the future in expanding the use of these instruments, and as they provide us the revolving funds, private investment, and also they force us to think with economic logic and then provide economic incentives, and I think to provide sustainability for some investments, because financial instruments can invest only in these kind of in the sectors which are financially sustainable in long term. Also, very important evaluation. We think I think we have a quite strong tradition of evaluations, and this programming exercise is also will be based on evaluations that we have. We will try to base our proposals and decisions on objective data of discussions with experts, with all the stakeholders. So this also is very important to evaluate what was done before, what works and was not. And another aspect that together with investments, we also are not forgetting that they do not always work if they are not complemented with social marketing. I mean the changes, behavioral changes in our target groups, or some kind of regulatory non-financial measures. We have such examples that some investments only worked when they were implemented together with communication and non-financial measures. So the timetable, it was mentioned, some of the dates are not certain. Nobody knows how these days will turn out, but currently we are planning to have our national development program to be adopted in September. But it means, and as I mentioned, we are already working on the development of this program. So in parallel, we have started already working on the preparation of operational program. So together with National Development Program, we think that we'll have a draft of investment program in September. Maybe not complete draft, but at least the investment strategy, which will be coherent with our National Development Program, and we will have a basis for negotiations and discussions. Of course, the agreement on MFF and regulations, nobody knows, but maybe the end of this year, and we hope to complete the negotiations of the new program and to adopt the program, of course, until the beginning of the next programming period, 2021. So I hope we will we are looking forward to the negotiations, and we hope that we will have the best investment program yet for this next programming period.
Thank you very much, Paulius. Now I would like to invite you to join the panel together with the other speakers. And we will take questions from the audience. Before doing that, I would like to invite the audience to take another poll. And the question will be, do you see a need to reduce Lithuania's dependency on EU structural funds? And when you take this poll, we will show you the answers to the previous one. Could you please hurry up so we wouldn't waste time? So those are the answers for previous poll. More social Europe, smarter Europe are clearly the winners. So would anybody like to comment on this? Okay, then before inviting to ask question in old-fashioned way by simply raising a hand, and we will give priority to questions asked in a live way, I would like to look at some backup questions which were submitted using Slido. And one of the questions was, I will quote from my memory, that do you see a risk that Lithuania can fall into middle income trap? And another question was, why do you think, why you prioritize investments in policy objective 1 and policy objective 2 when there are so many social problems, I think. So now we see the same thing in previous poll, that those two, that smarter Europe, Lithuania, and social area are really priorities. But the way those two questions were asked, I think one basically answers the other. There is clearly a risk of falling into middle income trap. I mean, questions from the audience. On the other hand, if you don't invest into smarter economy, you won't avoid middle income trap. So I think you agree that, of course, investment into policy objective 1 is relevant in order to avoid middle income trap and enjoy prosperity. Now, let's see the answer to another poll, if we have one. Okay, you can maybe show the results. Okay, so clearly we see that this audience believe that there is need to reduce Lithuania's dependency on EU structural funds. Would anybody like to comment?
Thank you. That means you support the co-financing rate we are proposing, because we have inbuilt systems how to reduce dependency on our programs, and one of the mechanisms is the co-financing rate. And why we propose to reduce is exactly for that reason, to take ownership and to actually reduce the dependence on the funds. So thank you for this answer. I wanted to thank you also. The PO5 ranks number 3 constantly, so it's a good one. It's a new one, so you still don't know what it can achieve. 20% almost is very good. I will comment a little bit, because I think, of course, the way the questions are, they are a bit tendentious. Because when we talk about addressing social challenges, exactly what do you mean by that? Do you mean that we will pay benefits to unemployed people, or we will have some specific I don't know, training programs for them? Or do we mean that we will have a social inclusion and these principles are applied across the board? And particularly, do you mean that we need to create more, sustainable growth to be able to have more social Europe? Because one of the issues is that this level of social support and social inclusiveness in Europe is very different. And it's true that the richer countries have higher levels, and this creates a disbalance. So I think by supporting smarter Europe and also other policy objectives, if you do it in a correct way, you also are contributing to the social objective. So everything is interlinked, and my education is chemical engineer, so I studied biochemistry. I suggest all of you read one biochemistry book. Okay, just one, pick the simplest one, the American one from 25 years ago when I studied. That shows how everything is interlinked. So you want more social, you need to be smarter. Of course, you need to have connectivity, because when we look at the lagging regions or catching up regions, there can be infrastructure gaps which are so, important for development that you have to invest into infrastructure. It's true, maybe just 5% from ERDF and funds, but still you need to address and you need to prioritize. But it's also connected to the fact that you cannot develop. So the development is, of course, about everybody working together, like in a biochemistry book.
Thank you very much. Now we have a question from the audience.
Hello, I'm Claudius Maniokas, STEP Consultancy. Thank you for very interesting presentations. And my question is about linking basically previous part on challenges, European semester, and this part. And we moved from, identification of major, problems to priorities. And still, Anna, help me to find the link. Because, yes, we saw many problems which are more or less the same for a number of years, and challenges. And we looked, there are priorities, again, which are, again, more or less the same. Okay, so what I'm missing a bit, this is a missing part would be a kind of development policy or strategy or something which could link problems and priorities. And in most cases, these problems are no longer simple challenges. They are structural things, innovation, in a sense, income inequality and other things. Therefore, there should be some particular answers to these problems. We continue to invest into the same problems without achieving much of a result, being it inequality, lifelong learning, innovation for the last at least 10 years or so. And you propose to do, I'm not saying more of the same, you are proposing to do less of the same, because a bit of less of money, but to do the same things. So still, you probably have to imply a certain strategy. So you cannot invest into everything, and you cannot invest into every average. Somehow you are suggesting more or less average strategy. If there is no average, you should invest into it. If it's above the average, there is no problem, no point of investment. It's too simple, I'm afraid. Could you offer us a bit smarter way? Thank you.
Somebody like to respond?
I can try to be smarter, sure. Well, first of all, semester is not the process which started yesterday. It's been going on for years. And it's true that the problems that have been identified through the European semester, they are not new. It's the first time we are clearly saying they are totally, important for the fund's implementation. I think ESF, and Katarina will explain more, has been more really totally linked to the semester. So what is new in your work, I don't know. There are novelties all the time, but I think you've been there. For us, the first time is that we clearly come out and say, yes, ERDF investment, which is, the classic fields, innovation, connectivity, and also PO2 under energy and environment. Yes, they should be looked into the, light of the analysis of European semester. And to me, this analysis shows that our priorities are right. I said clearly myself that the PO 1 to 4 is not totally new. We reassessed what we do under these policy objectives. For example, innovation, we started smart specialization, which we believe is the right way to approach innovation and research through funds. It's not the way Horizon does it, by the way, through excellency, which is also one way and is needed, but that's for Horizon. For us, the challenge is how do we make innovation a daily business of everybody? How every poor region can start innovating from somewhere, from scratch. And this is why smart specialization is actually a new concept for us. We tried to implement it already this year, but now we are building on it. So we want to go even more regional, more local, try to see what doesn't work under this smart specialization. So I'm hurt when you say innovation, we just continue n'importe quoi. It's not true. We completely changed the approach for this period. But I find it a success story because when we were talking to stakeholders, we were really, we almost, people were crying and saying, thank you for putting it in place because now the poor region, I know what to do and I'm together with this city now. We are linked and we are trying to do innovation because innovation, and there are different definitions obviously, but I stick to the one which is the classic. Innovation is good for economic growth. It's a key of growth. It's a key of competitiveness. So, but the problem is that people don't know where to start. When you are very low, when you are very stupid like me, then you have to start, I'm sorry to use this, where you have to learn. And then, it comes. And I don't say we will support maybe the same things in Lithuanian program we did already. We also try to link the support to small and medium-sized enterprises to smart specialization. For the first time, we clearly basically say, in principle, you should only support SMEs which can become specialized, smart, innovative. Okay, then we hear, but that's not enough. We still have specific SMEs which can be competitive even if they are not part of that innovation strategy. So you see, we have to find compromises under this PO1. We also have noticed that there's a lot of talk about analysis about different fields, right? But then when we look at regional, it actually matches the regional needs. So you have ex-industry regions, for example, which desperately need to convert to something. And sometimes they have difficulties in that conversion. It's not mentioned there maybe explicitly yet, but that's one of the strands we want to explore. Regions in transition, the ones who were heavy industry regions or regions were coal, and we are doing now pilot projects on this, which we hope to mainstream if there is a necessity under PO1 and also under PO2. I think PO2 is kind of tricky because under this you have evident measures which you have to do, and that's about energy efficiency. Because you have to do it, and we've been doing it for years, and you have to continue. Maybe you have to shift more to financial instruments, look at the, more greener energy, but in the end it leads also to your strengths. I have now initiative, Clean Islands initiative. I think it makes sense to support it from funds, only renewables on all islands in Europe, because they are not connected to sources of energy, so they have to be a showcase of the wind, solar, I don't know, whatever alternative energies we can find there. But I think it makes sense, and that's a new initiative. And Lithuania doesn't have any island, right? I mean, the only one we had, Estonians stole many years ago. We sold it to them, but anyway. So we don't have experience. But there's so many islands in Europe, and that's something new, which we target in all our papers, that we want to make, for example, all islands in Europe clean and, you know, in terms of energy. And this is something which we do. The other stuff under PO2 is questionable because climate adaptation measures how much you invest on your own, how much you need from us. We need to see that. It needs to be done because unfortunately the environmental, you know, situation is not improving, right? We know that. We have new concepts now, the circular economy. Maybe it's not, you know, brand new as of today, but it's the first time we are talking about circular economy being fully put in place in Europe and supported from funds and so on and so on. I hope I'm answering your question. So we are not really transfixed on supporting the same things, even if they look like the same, but we are in a constant development and we are looking also for new ideas. And we are looking for innovative solutions to existing problems. I mentioned the urban innovative actions. I'm going to have to see what we can learn from that for urban areas in these fields where we support innovative actions. And there could be things we would like to put in mainstream programs through the urban earmarking, for example. But again, this is part of you know, evaluation of what we do, and then building on what is good and getting rid of what is not needed. I agree. There maybe are things which we, as you can see, you know, the 8% thinks infrastructure is a problem. Maybe it's true we should go less for infrastructure because it takes a lot of money and, you know, then it's not there. But on social fund, Katerina, you can say what we do.
I'm not going to say what are we going to do new because it's up to our member states to say what are they going to do new. I wanted to say that there is a famous writer called George Shaw who said, why to repeat all the mistakes when there are so many new ahead of us? So in this respect, with proposing and with reopening and with reinventing the wheel, where should we go and where could we be? So I would propose in the area of social policy, stick to what is working, what is not working, correct it. If you can address challenges in a different way, please do. If you see that some areas need to be strengthened, please do. If you see to invest more in social infrastructure, in social housing, to address old problems, these are not new problems which will come within the time, please address it. So in this respect, I think what is really important that we try to put all of the heads together. I think you have a very ambitious plan. I'm really looking forward for the September. If we are going to have the first exchange of the programs, that would be amazing, and then that we would be able to see where we are driving and what are we driving. Are we driving the new hybrid Porsche? I don't know if does it exist or not, but sounds good to say. Or if we are driving an old car which is a little bit needed to be repaired, but I'm sure that the good balance is going to be struck. And please don't think that everything new is whatever. There are things that are working and that should be continued to work, and Commission in proposing new initiatives, new policies, has always been really carefully in looking what the impact is. We have now so many new proposals that have just recently been adopted. We need to implement them. So that is even more important even when you are proposing something new, be sure that you implement it and be sure that you see that it's working. And that's why I think it's extremely important what your managing authority has shown about evaluations and about implementing recommendations. It would be really good to see at the European level how many recommendations from various evaluations were implemented, and it would be also good to see the quality of the recommendations, I would say, because, you know, sometimes it's just given for various reasons in order to be there, to exist, but it would be really good to see. And if something is working, just go on.
Yes, and just a few words to add. Actually, as I said, it was not a surprise to us, the country report and Annex D, because we all know ourselves these problems and we are dealing with them for quite a long time, and this is no surprise. So, but what is more much more difficult and more important is how to find ways to tackle them, because you know, we can say that we need more innovative enterprises, so we can say that we need more education, more aimed at the labor market. But how to achieve that? It's the most difficult question, and the Commission does not answer that. We need to find answers ourselves, the best answers. And then, like it was said, maybe something works, but in some areas we need to try to find innovative new ideas and to test them, to see what really works.
Okay, we have next question.
Yeah, thank you very much for today's presentation. It was a pleasure. All the Lithuanian...
Excuse me, could you present yourself?
Yeah, Justas Mandeikis from Vilnius University and Lithuanian Combinat blog. All the problems discussed today in the first session are homemade problems, basically. Income inequality, pension funding that is lacking. And overall, we see that everything is based in money. So my question to Paulius Beniūnas is actually, what are the plans of Finance, Ministry of Finance, to increase tax to GDP ratio in the next, let's say, 5 years, so we can see the funds that we need either to solve our own problems that we have, or either to co-finance in more the European projects to be, let's say, somehow gathered?
Yes. Unfortunately, I cannot answer this question because I'm just dealing with EU investments, and it's a bit outside of my competence to comment on the tax issues. But I think what is important in order to have co-financing for EU projects and so on, it's also what is important to have, like I said in the presentation, to have as much bigger impact as we can from every invested euro. Of course, the bigger co-financing will be a challenge, and we'll see how it will turn out at the end of negotiations. But
sorry, but the main problem is that we have very low tax to GDP ratio. That's the problem of Lithuania. So we cannot fund neither the healthcare system, neither the higher education system. So we cannot finance all these systems that are basically needed for our society to function. You are a representative of the Ministry of Finance, so whom shall we delegate this question to?
Yes, of course, but you know, the question on...
So you have to tell us, the society, somehow, what are your intentions for, let's say, next 5 years, how to finance our society.
But currently, the proposals of tax reform were put on the table and they are being implemented. But also there is a political question.
Let me break it through. The European Commission puts it's a minus sign. So we lose about 800 million from our public sector that we could use somehow to finance the healthcare system, to finance the education system. So you are giving 800 million kind of more or less away. So it has neither impact on the income inequality nor on poverty. So
Dear Justas, we perfectly understand your point.
But yeah, just want to make that clear. Yeah,
please do not engage in bilateral
this
discussion.
Is not only, the question for the expert, or it's also a political question. How we choose to redistribute income, how we choose to tax, how we choose our tax system, how much progressive it will be. Currently there is such an agreement currently by the current government and our parliament, but I'm not the one to comment, on the bigger changes maybe, which could be needed.
No, but if I may say, you're not correctly putting the question to your experts either. We are not part of your budget. I mean, the EU funds do not support neither the maintenance, neither the salaries. I hope ESF doesn't either. But, well, very limited. But we do have technical assistance, very small part, where we, pay for people who work for the fund management. It's very, very small part. So in general, if you use the use of our money is really for investing into improvement in a system, in a sense, be it infrastructure or through ESF, in the quality of your health or education system. But it's never going to be about EU funds funding your health or education system, right? So it has to be sustained. It's not that you are losing for health and education these millions. It's not true. It's your own way to find. And in your country report, you do find suggestions also on tax reform, which is totally out of my competence. So I'm not a tax expert, but I think there are even some specific recommendations on the tax reform, what needs to be done, and I know there are different experiences, how to fight the black market and everything. We have different countries, so it's included indirectly from the Commission point of view. It's true what my colleague says. It requires also, and we see that, it requires political courage, will to progress with some of the reforms. And some of the heaviest sectors which we see apart from tax reform is health and education. I will be honest with you. I have to analyze still what has happened in Lithuania. This is why we talk about the key enabling conditions. We really want to avoid investment in a health system if the reform is not clear. We are about to build 3 hospitals in one member state, and I'm really doubting whether they have finished the reform. Because the worst is that EU money will be invested into something which then will not be part of your health reform, and it will not fit. And this is why, because health and education reforms, as I've been assured by experts, takes a longer time and quite heavy to reform normally, so is labor market reform, which I think you progressed in Lithuania quite a lot. It does require, the push from everyone, from scientists and politicians and experts, but to work together and have this political momentum to do something about it. I'm not suggesting in these fields much more than we have written in our key enabling conditions. If you want the funds to give some funding to the hospitals or healthcare system, we need to see the mapping and the concrete signature in blood from whatever minister you have at the moment. I'm sorry to be so very bluntly outspoken here, but whoever is in charge to sign that this is gonna, stay, because then I and my team can also look at the possibilities from our program to invest into the health system. It's not just about social fund, because social infrastructure is funded through ERDF a lot, for schools, for kindergartens, for hospitals, for primary care. But we are very, very careful with that, because we need to be sure that, like you said, the right homework is done. But this is why also, key enabling conditions in future will play even stronger role for EU funds. So you might even have those 500 million available for health, but we will not start investing if the reform is not there, if we judge that it's not fulfilled. That's what I'm trying to pass for the future period. We will try to be even, more careful with investing into these fields.
And maybe if it's okay? Yes. So if I can just add what Norman just said, when it comes to the social infrastructure and this investments in social infrastructure, we spend lots of time, and our colleagues spend lots of effort in trying to define the synergies between the ERDF actions and the ESF Plus actions. Why? Because we have seen that in present and in past programming period, many of those activities have been either divided by the different ministries or completely not corresponding together. So in this respect, I would really advise you, and I would really support a stronger link between the social infrastructure and then adding this ESF plus activities with it. So for example, if we speak about childcare institutions, it's fine, it's perfectly great that you would develop the kindergartens, but please also take into account the workforce, that you have sufficient number of teachers, that you offer new new services. If the demand is for the afternoon shift of the kindergartens, then make sure that you have sufficient number of teachers that could take the afternoon shift. If you need additional equipment, that could be purchased either both through ERDF or through ESF. When it comes to the long-term care institutions and infrastructure, please also have in mind that you have sufficient number of workforce. Yes, we can finance salaries in some areas. We can finance certain salaries when it comes to the ESF Plus, but they need to be justified, clearly explained, the part of your bigger programs, projects, however. So in this respect, indeed, by securing the consistency and by avoiding any overlapping in any area, I think we could come to the effect that the funds will pay in respect that it will release more funds in the national budgets than that could be forwarded through other activities. It's not an easy process. It's not easy to see where you could put the activities in the funds perspective. We, of course, have the additionality, so whatever we finance from the funds has to be co-financed and has to be implemented in a different ways within the member states, but there is a way to do it. But it has to be very smart, it has to be very carefully planned, and I think you will be quite soon there, because if in the autumn the programs are going to be seen, or the outline of the programs, we don't expect that the actual programs, you could see where your money will go.
Okay, at the moment we are almost 23 minutes over time. So I would like to thank you very much for your interest in this important subject. And since our official agenda is exhausted, I would like to propose you to invite to continue discussions with some refreshments which are beside the door, I believe. Thank you very much.